Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I hope my voice is clear and also seeing me well. Also, those who are watching from online. Yeah. Today I will be speaking to you about unity in diversity, the way I understood it, and I will use that understanding to explain the situation in South Sudan. Then I will conclude with few recommendations. My name is Laura Nunu, originally South Sudanese, as you can see, but officially I'm Dutch living in the United Kingdom. And I want you just to hold this complex identification as you follow me through this presentation. The story of unity in diversity was a personal journey. It started due to frustration I found myself in. And I think all of you can agree with me that if we look generally globally, we'll find that at individual level, most of us are stressed, some are depressed, and others are totally burned out. And if we look at politically, we are more polarized and very competitive. And socially, we are very discriminative. Then I start to ask myself, and if putting this in the context of South Sudan, it's even worse. And what we have now, people are dying at an alarming rate every day. Then I start to ask myself, who are we actually? And where do we come from? Why are we in this miserable life? What's the purpose of this life? Then I came to realize, actually, I think we are facing what I came to call spectrum of global identity crisis. Then I was, what could that even mean? What is identity crisis to begin with? Then as I ponder around this, then the idea of unity in diversity was born. And what unity in diversity is, to me, is not only is a concept, but it's also a law. And what it's really trying, the question it's trying to answer is, how do we come to exist as diverse as we are and still get connected? Because most of the time we are either diverse and want to come together to form unity, or we are one body. But then I was asking, can we be both? And that's when the law of unity and diversity, as I call it, comes to be. What it is saying is that there is unity in diversity, and every single diverse entity is a unique essence of their own. As simple as it is, it's talking of the whole diversity in the whole universe, if you like. But I would like to narrow it down into our human context. As humans, we are global diversity of unity in our humanity. What this means is that there is a basic unified truth about us. And this basic unified truth is what also constitutes our human values, which we also find in our natural rights and morality. But then what happened? How do we end up into this crisis of identity I talk about? To explain that, let's just borrow the idea of duality. And let's say that duality is realization that we are different from others. And for that, let's take the example of height. As a tall person, if you meet a short person, in that meeting, you will immediately realize that your height are different. And this is happening simultaneously, because also the short person will realize that they are shorter than the taller person. So to me, according to the concept of law, according to law of unity and diversity, it means actually duality is the process that creates diversity, because it doesn't end there. As we go further, we will meet shorter and shorter and taller people. So in this process of realizing our differences, we are creating diversity. But from the theory of evolution, we are told that evolution put us in hierarchical order for the survival of the fittest. So we humans, considering ourselves the highest in the evolution ladder, we tend to assume custodian and ownership over other species. And we take this along with us as we start to become civilized society, organizing ourselves in functional structure. So we tend to put ourselves in this hierarchical order. So the higher you are in any organizational function, the better it is for you. So to me, this is actually the basis of the human identity crisis. So then, how is this story even related to the conference we are having today? Well, what is it telling us? What, for me personally, from this perspective, the fundamental problem at the core of South Sudan war is South Sudanese all this time have been struggling to define who they really are. And there are a lot of events that have really impacted the South Sudanese identity heavily, starting right from the Ottoman Empire to the current civil war that is happening. So in the previous North and South war, it was an identity crisis that came a result because the Sudanese were being and still are being identified from the narrow view of Arab future or Arab culture. South Sudanese having African features and practicing African culture automatically find themselves outsider in their own country. And also given the dark history of colonialism where Arabs were used as slave trades for the native Africans, South Sudanese were more or less seen slaves than their counter-Arab-like citizen. And that put them in a less privileged position where they are being discriminated against or and marginalized. And they fought for, for 50 plus years to get independent, which they did in 2011 under the SPLM liberation struggle. But 2 years in that independence, they are war with themselves. And then people were asking, you are dark as night and just have separated from what you call Arab domination and marginalization. Why are you fighting yourself? So then the question is, to answer the question, you have to know who really South Sudanese are. South Sudanese were and still are clusters of tribes who came to find themselves in the geographical area now called South Sudan. So there are three words that will really, the bitter truth about South Sudan's work can be described in three words: power, people, and land. And these tribes, before even the intervention I talk about came to the current South Sudan, these tribes have been fighting each other. And the unwritten notions about this war is that the more powerful you are, the more you are in control of land and its resources. And the more you control the land and its resources, you control the people. And the more you control the land and the resources and its people, you are powerful. And this power struggle has been going on among these tribes, shifting, roles from one to another, until the intervention came. And this to me seems to be at the core of what is the war, the core of the war in the current South Sudan. So to sum it up, I will say that South Sudanese have not reached to the state of calling themselves, have not reached to a unified identity of calling themselves South Sudanese. They are just spectrum of tribal diversity living in a geographical area called South Sudan. And to make note about, I always say spectrum because diversity itself is diverse. It is diversity within diversity because as we expand, we create variables. So that's most of the time when I speak of diversity, I always mention the word spectrum. But irrespective of the negative impacts of colonialism, there is something positive was going on also. There are two groups that have taken a unified identity journey. That is the group of Faratit in Western Bahar al Ghazal and Equatoria. So what the colonialism have done is it has important to them a linguistic and religion and educational system and political system. So as they tend to merge together or to unify themselves, they use this new important ideology to become one people. As such, you will find even Equatoria with half of the tribe in South Sudan, they still call themselves Equatorian. So these are the footnotes we have to also put into consideration, because it shows possibility of creating a unified identity. So what is the word forward? As I was searching for this presentation, I crossed two books. One is talking about how the European unions came together to form, one identity of Europe and European Union. And the other one was talking about how all a new federal system, were created and what challenges they are facing. So, and actually the idea of federalism came with the concept of unity in diversity, because it's an idea of how diverse entities can come together and form a unified identity. And there are spectrum of also federal system, as we know now that diversity is diverse itself. So there are a spectrum of diversity. So one is mostly talking about, there are two extremities. One is talking about self-government, and the other one is talking about shared government. But you will find out the two overlap. There is no extreme, like this is self-government and autonomy and confederation, and the other one is shared government and territorial arrangement and all the other arrangements. So they overlap, but you will find that in any federal system, states may have similar arrangement, but what they really differ from is core issues. What are the core issues that is driving it? Sometimes it's about, ethnical identity. Sometimes it's about territorial issues. So the core issue really is that which is driving the arrangement. So as we talk of federalism, we should be focusing what our core issues are. What is driving this federalism? I'm not going to speak to that because I know there are people who will be focusing on that in details. I'm just trying to highlight it with the idea of unity and diversity. So the recommendation I have is actually divided into two, the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. In the top-down approach, about the international community have been, the core body in seeing us through in the journey of South Sudanese independence starting. But there are two elements. There are something about this international community, the habit of prejudice. International community knew when the South Sudanese war or the liberation struggle were being fought, it was being fought through tribal lines. With Dr. John Geren, leading the Dinka-dominated group, Riyad leading the Nuer-dominated group, Lamarcol leading the Cholo-dominated group. But for some reason, they chose Dr. Geren to sign the peace agreement, the CPA with Khartoum. And his group acknowledged that as legitimization of their group winning the war. And that also creates struggle within the group. And also the 22 years was wasted actually fighting within themselves. So international community, knowing this fact, not choosing neutral body actually to sign that body or having an alternative for having a management for this timing bomb of Dr. John signing the peace, that was to me actually they could have done better. and secondly, now history is being created. Now the peace which is being signed, it has been peace that is actually also trying to appease the tribal elites. It's not the peace of the people. So it is just peace between the tribal elites who are, it's the peace which is signed for actually position. It has nothing for the people of South Sudan. And the other recommendation is for the opposition group, actually really to, I know with all this happening, there is a lot of trust issue. For the opposition group really to start to see values in each other. Because no one group can win this war, and even if they do, they will need to find a way of forming coalition. So this will be an opportunity for them to find common ground. And the top-up approach is, I will conclude here. The bottom-up approach is really my favorite because that's where democracy starts. And that democracy cannot start without the people acknowledging their value as citizens. So the main thing South Sudanese should start asking themselves is what kind of South Sudanese they want to be. And from that journey, they have to also find out what kind of country they want to be in. So that we can all call ourselves South Sudanese and have that unified identity and create a sustainable country. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Laura. You raised many issues, which I'm sure our colleagues here, the audience, will also raise, ask the same question.